Billionaire dad sees poor little girl crying in front of her demolished house. What happens next is unbelievable. Derek Hayes adjusted his sunglasses as he stepped out of the gleaming black Audi. The afternoon sun beat down on the open lot, making him squint for a moment. His driver remained in the car with the air conditioning running, a small display of power Derek no longer even noticed. "Mr. Hayes, the project is on schedule." The construction manager rushed to catch up with him, holding a clipboard and speaking with short breaths. "The demolitions were completed yesterday. We'll start clearing the debris this afternoon." Derek just nodded, his eyes scanning the site. Piles of broken concrete, splintered wood, and abandoned belongings were strewn across what had once been a residential block. Now, it would be another major development, the 20th supermarket in the Hayes Retail Solutions chain. "Sign of the numbers good?" Derek asked, not really caring about the answer. He already knew they were. They always were. "Excellent, sir. The estimated return exceeds our initial projections by almost 15%. Derek smiled slightly. That was all that mattered. Numbers going up, charts pointing upward, the next project already planned before the current one was even finished. The machine could not stop. He checked his watch, a meeting with investors in 2 hours. Enough time for a quick inspection and then a quick lunch at the club. "I'm going to take a walk," he announced, dismissing the manager with a gesture. "I want to see the full perimeter. Of course, Mr. Hayes, be careful with the rubble. We haven't done the full cleanup yet." Derek walked across the lot, pleased with his new acquisition. The location was perfect, a developing area, a large plot, few legal obstacles after the last residents were removed. He took his phone out of his pocket to take a few photos to show the investors. That's when he heard it. A faint sound, almost inaudible over the noise of machinery in the distance. Someone was crying. Derek frowned, putting his phone away and turning toward the sound. He took a few hesitant steps, rounding a pile of wreckage that had clearly been the outer wall of a house. And there, sitting on a small pink suitcase, was a little girl. She was small, maybe 5 years old, with dusty blonde hair and tear-filled blue eyes. She wore a yellow dress stained with dust and was hugging a worn-out teddy bear. Her tears left clean streaks on her dust-covered face. Derek froze. Children were not his territory. He had one face, of course, but Haley was cared for by nannies, private tutors, and his ex-wife. He rarely had to deal with her alone for more than a few hours. "Hey," he called out, uncomfortable. "You shouldn't be here. It's dangerous." The little girl looked up, her blue eyes widening as she saw the man in the expensive suit. She didn't move, just hugged the bear tighter to her chest. "Where are your parents?" Derek insisted, looking around. "You can't be here alone," the girl sniffled, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her dress. "My mum went to find us a place to stay," she answered in a small voice. "She told me to wait here with our things." Derek looked at her things. The small pink suitcase and the bear were clearly the only belongings she had managed to save. A lump formed in his throat. "Side, what's your name?" "Zoe," she replied, still crying softly. "Zoe," Derek repeated. "Why are you crying?" Her answer hit him like a punch to the gut. "They tore down our house," Zoe said, pointing to the rubble beside them. "We didn't have the money to pay." Derek looked in the direction she was pointing, one of the demolished houses. Her real family had lived there. This real child had slept there yesterday. "This house was yours?" he asked, his voice losing its usual firmness. Zoe just nodded, the tears returning with force. "And now we have nowhere to go. Mummy said it's going to be okay, but she was crying too." Derek swallowed hard. He was used to seeing properties, not people. Lots, not stories. Profits, not consequences. The world he had built for himself was made of spreadsheets, not children's tears. "How long has your mum been gone?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I don't know. She said she'd be back soon," Zoe answered, now wiping her tears with determination. "Yes, but she can't be too long because I'm hungry." The simplicity of that concern, hunger, a basic need, made Derek feel something strange in his chest. Discomfort? No, it was deeper. It was a kind of unease he couldn't identify. "I can wait with you," he offered, surprising himself. "Until your mum gets back." He sat on a piece of concrete, keeping a respectful distance from the girl. They sat in silence for a few minutes, Derek occasionally checking his watch. The meeting with the investors would start in an hour and a half now. "Do you work here?" Zoe asked, curious. Derek hesitated. "Yes." "Sort of. Did you tell them to break our house?" The innocent question pierced him like a blade. He couldn't answer. "Mommy said a man told us we had to leave," Zoe continued, looking at her bear. She tried to explain that we didn't have anywhere else to go, but he didn't want to hear it. With every word the girl spoke, something inside Derek broke. He had never been present for the evictions. They were just numbers in reports. X families relocated, Y owners compensated. He had never seen the faces, never heard the stories. "Does your bear have a name?" he asked, trying to change the subject. "Buddy," Zoe replied, showing him the worn-out toy. "He's my best friend. Mommy said I could only bring one thing when we had to run, and I chose him. A choice no child should ever have to make." Derek felt the discomfort grow. It was something heavier than simply disliking the situation. It was a corrosive feeling that seemed to eat away at him from the inside. Guilt. He was feeling guilt. Derek looked at his watch, a little over an hour until his meeting with the investors. He couldn't just sit here waiting for a mother who might take a long time to return. "I have to go now," he said, standing up. "Are you sure your mom told you to wait right here?" Zoe nodded, clutching Buddy to her chest. "How she said I wasn't supposed to move from here no matter what." Derek found himself in a dilemma. He couldn't just leave a 5-year-old child alone on a demolition site. On the other hand, it wasn't his responsibility. He had a company to run, investors to meet, projects to approve. "Are you leaving?" Zoe asked, her still damp blue eyes looking up at him. The simple question made Derek feel another pang of that strange feeling. "I have an important meeting," he explained, as if that would make sense to a 5-year-old. "It's okay," she replied, looking down. "Buddy and I are used to waiting." Derek hesitated for another moment, then turned and walked toward the car. Each step felt heavier than the last. As he turned for a final look, he saw Zoe playing distractedly with Buddy, amidst the rubble of what had been her home. The image was seared into his mind, the little blonde girl, so much like his own daughter, clinging to a teddy bear as if it were her only safe harbor in the world. He returned to the car in silence, ignoring the further questions from the construction manager. In the back seat of the Audi, he looked out the window as they left the site. The image of Zoe wouldn't leave him, her teary blue eyes, her dirty yellow dress, the little pink suitcase with all that was left of her life. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. Derek didn't answer immediately. Something inside him had shifted, small, still undefined, but undeniably present. That feeling of guilt would haunt him for a long time. Derek barely paid attention during the meeting with the investors. His lips formed automatic smiles. His voice repeated rehearsed phrases about market expansion and return on investment. But his mind was stuck on a rubble-filled lot, with a blonde girl sitting on a pink suitcase. "Mr. Hayes." "Is everything all right?" one of the investors asked when he lost his train of thought for the third time. "Perfectly," he replied, regaining his composure. "As I was saying, the new development will bring a revenue increase of approximately 20% in the next quarter." When he finally got home, the sun had already set. The mansion was quiet, as always. 32,000 square feet of silence and cold marble. Derek loosened his tie as he walked up the stairs. "Has Haley had dinner?" he asked the housekeeper who was passing in the hallway. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. She's in her room playing. She asked if you would have dinner with her, but it was already past 7. The woman let the sentence hang in the air without explicit judgment, but Derek felt the weight of her words nonetheless. "Thank you, Margaret. You may go." Derek continued down the hall, stopping in front of his daughter's bedroom door. He hesitated before knocking. How many times had he done this in the last few weeks? Come in for a quick goodnight kiss, promised a weekend outing that never happened, bought expensive gifts to make up for his absence. He knocked lightly and went in. Haley's room was enormous, decorated in soft shades of pink and white. A 2-story dollhouse occupied one corner, along with shelves full of toys still in perfect condition. On the king-size bed, among soft pillows, Haley was playing with her collection of stuffed horses. Seeing her there, surrounded by comfort and safety, made something tighten in Derek's chest. Haley's blonde hair fell in perfect curls over her shoulders. Her blue eyes, so much like Zoe's, lit up when she saw him. "Dad!" she exclaimed, dropping her toys and running to hug him. "You're home early today." Derek picked her up, surprised by how much she had grown. When was the last time he had really looked at her? 5 years old, the same age as Zoe. But what different worlds they inhabited. "Sayakam, how was your day, princess?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed with Haley on his lap. "It was fun. The teacher taught us about the phases of the moon, and then I played with Sophia at recess. Then we—" Derek listened to his daughter talk, but his mind drifted between the present and the memories of the demolished lot. Haley had a room bigger than the entire apartment where Zoe and her mother probably lived. She had more toys than she could ever use, clothes she barely wore once before they were replaced, and Zoe had only a worn-out bear and a pink suitcase. "Dad?" Haley's voice brought him back. "You're different today. Are you worried?" Derek blinked, surprised by his daughter's perception. "Why do you think that?" "Because you're looking at me, but you're not seeing me," she replied with the direct simplicity of children. "Mum does that when she's thinking about her problems." Derek smiled, touching his daughter's delicate face. "I was just thinking about some things today. I met a little girl your age." "Where?" Haley asked, curious. Derek hesitated. How could he explain? "At a place where we're building a new store. She was all alone." "Where was her mum?" "She had gone to take care of some things." The answer sounded hollow even to him. He had left a 5-year-old child alone on a lot full of rubble. What would Gabrielle, his ex-wife, say if she knew someone had done that to Haley? "Was she nice?" Haley asked, picking up one of her stuffed horses. "I think so. We didn't talk much." "Can she come play here? I have a ton of toys and only Sophia comes over sometimes." The innocent question shot through Derek like an arrow. The image of Zoe sitting on this luxurious bed, staring in wonder at all the toys Haley had. It would be comical if it weren't so tragic. 2 girls of the same age, with the same appearance, separated by a chasm he had helped create. "I don't know, sweetie. Maybe." Haley shrugged and went back to playing, but Derek remained seated, watching her. She picked up one horse, then another, creating elaborate stories in her mind, safe in her protected world. What if it were her? The question arose like a whisper in his mind. What if it were Haley sitting in the rubble of her demolished home? What if it were Haley holding her favorite toy, knowing it was all she had left? What if it were Haley who was hungry, waiting for a mother who had gone out to find a place for us to stay? Derek felt a lump in his throat. For 6 years, since founding Hayes Development, he had only seen numbers, not people. Revitalized areas, not displaced families. Necessary market adjustments, not children like Zoe. He stood up, kissed Haley's forehead, and walked to the window. The view from the mansion showed the illuminated garden and, beyond it, the city lights. Somewhere out there, Zoe and her mother were probably trying to find a place to sleep. "Dad?" Haley called again. "Or do you promise you'll come say goodnight before I fall asleep?" Derek turned, seeing his daughter among the soft pillows and expensive toys. Guilt consumed him from within. "I promise, princess. I'm just going to take a shower and I'll be back to read you a story, okay?" Haley's smile lit up the room. Can I pick which one?" "Of course you can." Derek left the room and went to his own suite. He turned on the shower and let the hot water run over his shoulders as the images of the day swirled relentlessly in his head. Zoe sitting on the suitcase, Haley running to hug him, Zoe crying in the rubble, Haley playing safely in her bed, Zoe saying she was hungry. Haley with her dinner served on time. Derek Hayes, the ruthless entrepreneur, the negotiator who never lost, the man who had multiplied his initial fortune tenfold in 6 years, felt small and insignificant in the face of the reality he had just seen. For years, his decisions had affected real people, people with names, faces, stories, children. They weren't just delinquent tenants. They were families like Zoe's. They weren't obstacles to progress. They were human lives. He put on his robe and went to his office. He opened his laptop and began researching the history of the latest acquisition, the lot where he had found Zoe. The report spoke of a successfully completed repossession process, adequate financial compensations offered, legal obstacles overcome. Nowhere did they mention Zoe or her mother. Nowhere did they speak of a 5-year-old child left alone in the rubble of her own home. Derek closed the laptop and rubbed his eyes. He needed to keep his promise to Haley, read her a story, give her a goodnight kiss. Then he would try to figure out how to fix what could be fixed, or at least how to live with what he couldn't. 3 days had passed since Derek found Zoe in the rubble. 3 days of mechanical work, empty conversations with partners and restless nights. The images of the girl would not leave him. On the morning of the 4th day, Derek made a decision. He cancelled 2 meetings, postponed a conference call, and asked his driver to take him to the neighborhood where the demolition site was located. "I'll get out here," he instructed the driver when they reached the main avenue a few blocks from the site. "So come back for me in an hour." Derek walked the neighborhood streets, observing for the first time the details he had never noticed before: the small shops, the hurried people, the old and run-down buildings. It was a world away from his glass and steel offices, his luxury restaurants, his isolated mansion. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. Or rather, he did, but wouldn't admit it. He wanted to find Zoe, to make sure she was okay, maybe offer some anonymous help, something to alleviate the weight of the guilt that wouldn't let him sleep properly. Derek was about to give up when he saw her, sitting alone on the front steps of an old building, 2 blocks from the demolished site. The same little blonde girl, the same worn-out teddy bear, the same yellow dress which now looked even more faded under the morning light. He hesitated before approaching. What would he say? How would he explain his presence there? Derek Hayes never had doubts, never hesitated. Business was simple. You want something? You identify what you need to do to get it, and you do it. But this was different. He bought a sandwich and an orange juice from a nearby diner and walked to the steps where Zoe was sitting. "Hi," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Do you remember me?" Zoe looked up. For a moment, she seemed confused. Then, a flicker of recognition lit up her face. "You're the man from the rubble," she replied, hugging Buddy tighter against her chest. Derek smiled, uncomfortable with the description. "Yeah, that's me. My name is Derek." "I'm Zoe," she replied, as if he didn't know. "Fair, and this is Buddy." "A pleasure to meet you both officially." Derek offered the sandwich and the juice. "Are you hungry?" The girl's eyes lit up, but she hesitated, looking toward the building's doors. "Mommy said not to take anything from strangers." "Your mom is right," Derek agreed, respecting the rule. "Maybe when she gets back, I can offer it to you both." "She's looking for a job," Zoe explained, looking longingly at the sandwich. "She said she'd be a while today." Derek pondered for a moment. "What if I leave the snack here, on the step? I'm not giving it directly to you. You'll only take it if you want to." Zoe smiled at the solution. "So I think that might be okay." Derek placed the sandwich and juice beside her on the step and took 2 steps back, sitting on the bottom stair. Zoe didn't waste any time grabbing the snack and starting to eat eagerly. Derek noticed she was saving small pieces of the sandwich in her pocket. "Why are you saving that?" he asked, curious. "For Mommy," Zoe replied between bites. "She gets hungry too." Derek felt a tightness in his chest. A 5-year-old child worried about saving food for her mother, while Haley never had to worry if there would be dinner on the table. "Do you like orange juice?" he asked, changing the subject. Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "It's my favorite. But we don't buy it much because it's expensive." "I have a daughter your age," Derek commented. "She loves orange juice too." "Really?" Zoe's eyes widened with interest. "What's she like?" "A lot like you, actually. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Her name is Haley." "Does she have a best friend like Buddy?" Derek smiled. "She has several stuffed animals, but I think her favorite is a horse named Star." "Wow, a horse." Zoe hugged Buddy. "Did you hear that? She has a stuffed horse?" As Zoe finished her sandwich, Derek continued talking about Haley, the books she liked, her favorite games, how much she loved it when he read her stories before bed. It was strange how he talked more about his daughter with this unknown girl than with his own partners and friends. Do you read her stories every night? Zoe asked. Derek felt a pang of guilt. Not always. Sometimes I get home late from work. My mom always reads to me, Zoe said with pride, even when we're really tired. She says stories are more important than sleeping. Derek nodded, thinking about how many nights he had missed with Haley because of meetings and business dinners that now seemed so insignificant. Haley's nanny probably read more stories to her than he did. Your mom is right, he replied sincerely. Stories are very important. You can read to me one day too, Zoe suggested with the innocence of children. If Mommy says it's okay. It would be a pleasure, Derek replied, surprised by his own sincerity. They talked for a few more minutes. Zoe told him how she and her mother were temporarily living in that building, in a borrowed room. She told him about the new kindergarten she would go to when things got better, and how she missed her friends from her old school. Derek listened, fascinated by the resilience of this child. There was no self-pity in her voice, just a simple acceptance of life as it was. That's when they heard hurried footsteps coming up the stairs. Zoe! A woman's voice sounded worried. Derek turned and saw a young blonde woman rushing toward them. She wore faded jeans, a simple shirt, and carried a worn-out bag. Her eyes, the same intense blue as Zoe's, first fixed on her daughter, then on Derek, and immediately narrowed with suspicion. Who are you? She asked, pulling Zoe close in a protective gesture. Mommy, this is Derek, Zoe answered before he could say anything. He gave me a sandwich and juice. I saved a piece for you. The woman looked at the rest of the snack on the step, then at Derek, who was now standing. The suspicion in her eyes was palpable. Why are you giving my daughter food? The question was laden with distrust. Derek took a deep breath. We met a few days ago when... Are you from social services? The woman interrupted. Because I've already spoken with them, and we're in a temporary situation. I have 2 job interviews scheduled for this week, and I'm not from social services, Derek clarified. I work with properties. I met Zoe near the place where you used to live. The woman's face hardened even more. You're from the construction company that tore down our house. The direct question caught Derek off guard. He felt exposed, vulnerable. I have a connection to the company, yes, he admitted, opting for a half-truth. I found Zoe on the day of the demolition and I was worried. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. The woman let out a dry, humorless laugh. A rich man helping the poor always has an ulterior motive, she said with bitterness. What do you want? To ease your conscience, or is this some kind of charity project to make you feel better? The words hit him like a slap. They were harsh, but they contained a truth he couldn't deny. He wasn't really there for Zoe. He was there for himself, to assuage his guilt. Mommy, Zoe intervened, tugging on the hem of her mother's shirt. Derek has a daughter my age. She has a stuffed horse. The woman looked at her daughter, then at Derek again. Her gaze was still suspicious, but something had softened. Rachel, she said finally. My name is Rachel. Derek Hayes, he replied, extending his hand. Rachel hesitated before shaking it briefly. I appreciate your concern for my daughter, Mr. Hayes, but we're fine. We're going through a tough time, but we'll get through it. The pride in her voice was evident. Derek admired her strength. I'm sure you will, he replied sincerely. And please, call me Derek. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Rachel clearly wanted him to leave, but didn't know how to say it without being rude in front of her daughter. Well, I should go, Derek said, sparing her the embarrassment. It was good to see you again, Zoe. And to meet you, Rachel. He started down the steps, feeling both their eyes on his back. When he was almost at the sidewalk, Zoe's voice stopped him. Derek, are you coming back to read me a story? He turned, uncertain. Rachel's face was unreadable, but she didn't seem happy with her daughter's question. That's up to your mum, Zoe, he answered honestly. Rachel put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. We'll see, she said, in a tone that made it clear the answer was no. Derek nodded, understanding the boundary she was setting. Have a good day. As he walked away, he could hear Zoe telling her mother about Haley and her stuffed horse. Something inside him had changed. It was no longer just guilt. It was a genuine desire to help. On the way back, he passed a bookstore. He stopped, looking at the window display full of colorful children's books. He went inside and, after a few minutes of browse, bought 3 books he thought Zoe might like. He didn't know how or when he would deliver them. Rachel would probably reject them, seeing them as charity or worse, an attempt to buy access to her daughter, but he would buy them anyway. In the car, on his way back to the office, Derek picked up his phone and called his secretary. "Sandra, cancel my meetings for this afternoon. I'm going to pick up my daughter from school early today." "Mr. Hayes?" The surprise in her voice was evident. Derek never changed his schedule for family matters. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, everything's fine," he replied. "I just want to spend some time with Haley. Can we reschedule the appointments for tomorrow?" "Of course, sir. I'll reorganize your schedule immediately." After hanging up, Derek looked at the package with the children's books on the seat next to him. He didn't know what he was doing or where this would lead him. He only knew that, for the first time in a long time, he was doing something that wasn't about money or power, something real. And that, surprisingly, made him feel more alive than any successful business deal of the past few years. The rain began as a quiet whisper in the early evening. Then, it turned into a violent roar that battered the city. Derek was in his office, finalizing the details of a new project, when the storm broke. Through the panoramic window of the 30th floor, he saw the streets below being washed by the merciless water. Something was bothering him, a persistent feeling he couldn't name. He thought of Haley, safe and warm at home, probably playing under the care of her nanny. Then he thought of Zoe. 2 weeks had passed since their encounter on the steps. Derek had returned twice more, always with a snack or a small gift. Colored pencils, a drawing pad. Rachel remained wary, but she no longer stopped him from talking to Zoe. It was slow, delicate progress. On his last visit, he had noticed that the borrowed room they mentioned was in a condemned building where they were squatting, a place that offered no adequate protection even on sunny days, let alone in a storm like this. Derek tried to focus on the documents in front of him, but it was useless. Would Zoe and her mother be dry, warm, safe? "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, closing the document folder. It wasn't his responsibility. He had done more than most would, offering snacks and small gifts. Even so, 15 minutes later, he was in his car, driving through the torrential rain toward the neighborhood where Zoe and Rachel lived. He had dismissed his driver earlier, something unusual. Tonight, he preferred to be alone. The streets were almost deserted, except for the most unfortunate. Homeless people huddled under awnings, workers running with newspapers over their heads, a few cars moving slowly through the puddles forming on the asphalt. Derek slowed down as he approached the building where he had last seen Zoe. He didn't really expect to find them outside on a night like this, but something compelled him to check. That's when he saw them. Huddled under a small awning in front of a closed shop, 2 blocks from the building where they were staying. Rachel was hugging Zoe against her chest, trying to shield her from the water that the strong wind was pushing under the insufficient cover. They were both soaked, shivering visibly even from a distance. Derek parked the car haphazardly and ran across the sidewalk, feeling the cold rain soak through his expensive suit in seconds. "Rachel," he called as he approached. "Zoe." They looked up, surprised. Zoe's face lit up with a fragile smile, but Rachel seemed too exhausted to even show surprise. "What happened?" Derek asked, stopping in front of them, the rain streaming down his face. "They evicted everyone from the building this afternoon," Rachel answered, her voice trembling from the cold. "City inspection. They said the place was going to collapse." Derek looked around. There was no one else on the streets, no visible shelter. "Where are you going to spend the night?" Rachel shrugged, a gesture of helplessness that said more than any words. "Derek." Zoe's small voice sounded muffled against her mother's chest. "Buddy is very cold." The teddy bear, now soaked, hung limply from the girl's hand. Derek felt his heart ache. "Please," he said, looking directly into Rachel's eyes. "Come with me. A dry place. That's all." He saw the hesitation on her face, pride fighting against need. Rachel was strong, determined to make it on her own, not to depend on anyone. especially not someone like him who represented everything that had taken away her stability. "I can't leave my daughter on the street on a night like this," Derek said, lowering his voice so only Rachel could hear. "Please." Rachel looked at Zoe, then at the storm around them, and finally at Derek. "Where?" she asked with suspicion. "I have an apartment a few blocks from here, small as simple, used for occasional guests." It wasn't entirely true. The apartment was an investment, kept empty for appreciation, but it was a safe, dry place with beds, hot water, and food. "No strings attached," Derek assured her, seeing her hesitation. "You can stay just for tonight, if you prefer. Tomorrow, we'll look for another solution." A clap of thunder roared above their heads, making Zoe flinch in fear. That's what decided it for Rachel. "Just for tonight," she agreed, getting up with difficulty, her clothes heavy with water. Derek quickly led them to the car. He turned the heat on full blast as he drove through the flooded streets. In the rearview mirror, he saw Zoe in the back seat, hugged by her mother, her lips still blue with cold. 10 minutes later, he parked in the garage of a middle-class building. It wasn't luxurious like his own residence, but it was clean, safe, and well-maintained. He went up with them to the 5th floor. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom, all modest in size but comfortable. The decor was neutral, almost impersonal. Derek rarely came here. "The bathroom is there," he indicated, opening the doors. "There are clean towels in the closet. I'll see what I can find for you to wear while your clothes dry." Rachel nodded, still wary, but necessity spoke louder. She took Zoe to the bathroom while Derek searched the closets for something that might fit. He found some t-shirts and sweatshirts he kept there for emergencies. They would be too big, but at least they would be dry. He left the clothes at the bathroom door and went to the kitchen. The apartment was rarely used, but Derek kept some non-perishable items in the cupboards. He found pasta, tomato sauce, some cans of tuna, and soup. He was putting water on to boil when Rachel and Zoe came out of the bathroom. Both were wearing his t-shirts as makeshift dresses, the sleeves rolled up several times. Zoe was holding Buddy, who had been carefully dried with the hairdryer. "Better?" Derek asked. Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "Much better." "And Buddy too." Rachel just nodded her head, still awkward with the situation. "I'm making something for you to eat," Derek said. "It's nothing special, but it will warm you up." "You didn't have to bother," Rachel muttered, sitting at the kitchen table with Zoe. "It's no bother," he replied sincerely. They ate in silence, pasta with tomato sauce and tuna, accompanied by canned vegetable soup. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was hot and tasty. Derek watched Zoe eat with a voracious appetite, probably the first full meal she'd had in days. "You can have the master bedroom," Derek said when they finished. "It has a double bed. I'll take the guest room." "We don't need to kick you out of your room," Rachel protested. "Actually, I rarely sleep here," Derek admitted. "This is just a spare apartment." He saw Rachel's gaze harden slightly. For someone who had lost the only home she had, the idea of a spare apartment sounded like an insult. "You're safe here," Derek said, trying to change the subject. "The storm could last all night." As if to confirm his words, thunder rumbled outside, followed by the fierce howl of the wind against the windows. The rain continued to fall, mercilessly. Derek took the dishes to the sink while Rachel helped Zoe brush her teeth with a new toothbrush he had found in the closet. Then the mother took her daughter to the bedroom. Derek stayed in the living room, giving them space and privacy. About half an hour later, Rachel returned to the living room. She seemed less tense, but still uncomfortable. "Zoe's asleep," she reported, stopping at the entrance to the room. She was exhausted. "I imagine you are too," Derek replied. "Why are you doing this?" The question came directly, without beating around the bush. "What do you want from us?" Derek took a deep breath. It was a fair question. "I care about your daughter. A lot." The words came out simple, honest. "And by extension, I care about you too." "Why? You don't even know us." Derek didn't have a ready answer. How could he explain the guilt, the desire for reparation, the unexpected connection he had felt since their first meeting? I met Zoe on the day they demolished your house, he admitted finally. She was alone among the rubble. That image, I can't forget it. Rachel studied him for a long moment, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. You work for the construction company that evicted us, she said. It wasn't a question. Derek nodded, no longer trying to hide. It wasn't personal, he said, immediately realizing how empty the phrase sounded. I mean, I never thought about the real people affected by these projects. They were just numbers on a spreadsheet, until I met Zoe. Rachel crossed her arms. And now you're trying to make up for it. Maybe, Derek admitted. But it's not just that. Your daughter, she reminds me of what's truly important. A silence settled between them. Outside, the rain continued mercilessly. I'll accept your help tonight, Rachel said finally. Not for you, but for Zoe. She deserves a dry, warm bed. Derek nodded, respecting her honesty. Tomorrow we'll decide on the next step, she added, turning to go back to the room. At the door, she stopped. Thank you, she said, without looking back, the word almost inaudible before she disappeared down the hall. Derek stayed in the living room, listening to the storm outside. Something had changed that night. A door had opened, small, still hesitant, but undeniably real. And for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing something that truly mattered. A week had passed since the night of the storm. Rachel and Zoe had stayed in the apartment for 3 days, until Rachel found a temporary job as a waitress and rented a small room in a nearby boarding house. Derek had offered for them to stay longer, but Rachel had insisted on going her own way. Pride, independence, dignity, all of that mattered to her. Derek respected her decision, but he didn't disappear. He visited Zoe almost daily, always bringing a small gift, a book, a piece of fruit, a sweet treat. To his surprise, Rachel began to let her guard down a little. They weren't friends, but there was a silent truce between them. At home, Derek talked more and more about Zoe to Haley. His daughter, curious by nature, bombarded him with questions about this mysterious girl who seemed so much like her. Does she like princesses, Dad? Haley asked during Saturday morning breakfast. I think so, Derek replied, cutting a pancake into small pieces. She has a yellow dress she wears almost every day. Like Belle, Haley exclaimed, referring to the character from her favorite movie. Can I meet her? Please. Derek hesitated. The idea had crossed his mind several times, but it never materialized. How would Rachel react? Would she see it as another intrusion, an attempt to invade the small world she was fighting to protect? Maybe, he finally replied. I'll talk to her mum. Today? Haley insisted, her blue eyes shining with expectation. Derek smiled at his daughter's persistence. So we'll see. That afternoon, after leaving Haley with the nanny, Derek went to the boarding house where Rachel and Zoe were living. It was a simple but clean place, with a small common area where Zoe played when her mother was at work. That's where he found her, coloring in a used book he had brought a few days earlier. Derek? Zoe exclaimed when she saw him, running to hug his legs. This was a recent development. The girl had overcome her initial shyness and now greeted him with genuine enthusiasm. Hi, Princess, he greeted, crouching down to her level. Where's your mum? She's resting for a bit. She worked late last night. Derek nodded. Rachel worked double shifts whenever she could, saving every penny. I'll wait then. I don't want to wake her. Look what I'm drawing. Zoe took his hand and pulled him to the table where her coloring book was. It's a warrior princess. She has a sword and saves the prince from the dragon. Derek smiled, admiring the drawing. Zoe colored outside the lines, but with enthusiasm and creativity. That's amazing. I like princesses who save princes. Me too, a voice agreed from behind them. Derek turned and saw Rachel standing at the entrance of the common room. She looked tired but smiled faintly at her daughter. Sorry to show up unannounced, Derek said, standing up. I hope I didn't interrupt your rest. Rachel shrugged. I was already awake. What brings you here today besides the obvious? She added, glancing at Zoe, who had gone back to coloring. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Derek hesitated, choosing his words. My daughter, Haley. She's heard a lot about Zoe. She's curious to meet her. Rachel raised her eyebrows, surprised. You want to bring your daughter here? If you'll allow it, Derek replied. I thought maybe the girls could play together tomorrow. I can pick them up and take them to a park, or wherever you prefer. He saw the hesitation on Rachel's face. For her, accepting that Derek knew Zoe was already a big step. Allowing her daughter to meet his daughter would be crossing another boundary. Hailey is the same age as Zoe, Derek added, and I think they could get along well. Mom, Zoe had stopped coloring and was listening to the conversation with interest. Can I meet Hailey, please? Derek said she has a stuffed horse. Rachel looked at her daughter, then back at Derek. She sighed. All right, she finally gave in. But not a park here, and I'll be present the entire time. Of course, Derek quickly agreed. Whatever you think is best. And so, on Sunday afternoon, Derek returned to the boarding house with Hailey. His daughter was excited, holding a colorful package and talking non-stop the entire car ride. Do you think she'll like the gift, Dad? It's my favorite horse, but I have others. Sophia said you don't give old toys as gifts, but Star isn't old, she just has a lot of love, right? Derek smiled, looking in the rearview mirror. I'm sure Zoe will love it, sweetie. It's very generous of you to give Star to her. When they arrived, Hailey suddenly became shy, partially hiding behind her father's legs as they climbed the boarding house stairs. Derek could feel his daughter's nervousness, so unusual for her normally outgoing personality. Rachel opened the door before they even knocked. She seemed to have made an effort for the occasion. She wore a clean, well-pressed blouse, her hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Zoe stood beside her, the yellow dress replaced by a light blue one Derek had brought the week before. For a moment, everyone stood in silence, observing each other. Derek could almost feel Rachel's shock at seeing Hailey. The resemblance between the girls was truly striking. Both blonde, blue-eyed, the same height, the same face shape. They could easily pass for sisters. Hello, Hailey. Rachel was the first to break the silence. Zoe has been talking a lot about you. Hailey looked up at her father, who nodded encouragingly. Hi, she said shyly. Then her eyes met Zoe's, and something changed. A spark of recognition, of immediate connection. Did you bring the horse? Zoe asked, taking a small step forward. Hailey nodded, holding out the package she was carrying. This is Star. She's my best friend, but now she can be your friend too. Zoe took the package reverently, opening it carefully. Her eyes widened when she saw the white stuffed horse with a silver star on its forehead. She's beautiful, she exclaimed, hugging the toy. Do you want to see Buddy? Zoe offered. He's in the room. I think they'll be friends. And just like that, without any more ceremony, the barrier was broken. Zoe took Hailey's hand and pulled her inside, toward the small room she shared with her mother. Within seconds, the excited voices of the two could be heard, already engrossed in some imaginary game. Derek and Rachel were left in the small living room, a strange silence hanging between them. They look so much alike, Rachel commented finally. Derek nodded. Physically, yes, but I think Zoe has more maturity. Rachel gave a sad smile. Life teaches you early when you have no choice. Derek felt the weight of those words. Hailey had never needed to grow up before her time, never faced real hardship. She was a protected child, as she should be, but Zoe already knew the weight of life, uncertainty, loss. Would you like some coffee? Rachel offered, surprising him. It was the first time she had offered anything, a small gesture of hospitality that meant a lot. I'd love some, he replied. In the small communal kitchen, Rachel prepared 2 cups of instant coffee. It wasn't the expensive espresso Derek was used to, but somehow it felt more significant. Your daughter is lovely, Rachel commented, handing him one of the cups. She seems to have a good heart. I'm trying to raise her that way, Derek replied. It's not always easy with my schedule, but she's the priority. Rachel studied him over the rim of her cup. It's strange. A month ago, I hated everything you represented. Now, I don't know anymore. Derek didn't know what to say. He took a sip of his coffee, buying time. Zoe won't stop talking about you, Rachel continued. And now she probably won't stop talking about Hailey either. They were interrupted by laughter coming from the room. The two girls came running out, Haley holding Buddy and Zoe with Star. "Mom, Haley knows how to do braids. She's going to do them in my hair," Zoe announced, beaming. "And Zoe is going to teach me how to draw warrior princesses," Haley added, equally excited. Derek and Rachel exchanged glances. There was something surreal about the scene, their daughters, so different in opportunities and experiences, connecting as if they had always known each other. "Dad, can we bring my colored pencils next time?" "I want to show Zoe." "Of course, Princess," Derek replied, noting the use of next time, as if it were already established that there would be many more visits. The girls ran back to the room, leaving the adults alone again. "Looks like we've already decided there will be a next time," Rachel commented with a slight smile. "If you agree," Derek replied. Rachel sighed, looking toward the room. "I can't remember the last time I saw Zoe so happy. It would be cruel to separate them now." In the following weeks, the visits became regular. Derek brought Haley to play with Zoe 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes, he would take the girls on an outing for ice cream, to the movies, an afternoon at the park. Rachel was always invited, but didn't always accept, needing to work or rest. The friendship between Haley and Zoe blossomed impressively. It was as if they had found lost halves of each other. They shared toys, books, stories. Haley talked about her private school, her ballet and piano lessons. Zoe shared her vivid imagination, her creative drawings, her precocious wisdom about life's difficulties. Derek watched it all with a mixture of joy and guilt. He saw how Haley was becoming kinder, more aware of her privileges. He saw how Zoe was gaining confidence, expanding her horizons, dreaming bigger. On a particularly pleasant afternoon, after a trip to the zoo, Derek brought the girls back to the boarding house. They were exhausted but happy, still talking about the elephants and giraffes they had seen. Rachel greeted them at the door, having just arrived from work. "Mom," Zoe exclaimed, running to hug her, "we saw a bunch of animals." "And Haley's dad bought us ice cream, and I got a piggyback ride from her, and we took a picture with a huge snake." Rachel smiled, listening to her daughter's excited account. Her eyes met Derek's over Zoe's head. There was gratitude there, mixed with something more complex that he couldn't name. "Thank you for taking care of her today," Rachel said. "It sounds like it was fun." "It was great," Derek replied. "They both behaved perfectly." Haley, who was almost asleep on her feet, leaning against her father, opened her eyes. "Can we do it again next week?" "Please." Derek looked at Rachel, leaving the decision to her. "We'll see," she replied, but her tone was light, almost playful. It was a huge step up from the initial distrust. Later, after putting Haley to bed, Derek sat in his mansion's office, thinking about the day. Something was changing, not just in Zoe and Rachel, but in himself. Caring for these two people had become important, almost essential. He looked at the photo they had taken at the zoo. The two girls smiling, hugging, with faces so similar they could be twins. On either side of them, Derek and Rachel, both with cautious smiles, still navigating unknown waters. An unlikely family, brought together by tragic circumstances, but finding something valuable amidst the rubble. Derek put the photo in his drawer, feeling that he was only just beginning to understand what really mattered in life. Autumn arrived, bringing cold winds and golden leaves. 2 months had passed since Haley and Zoe's first meeting, 2 months of a growing friendship between the girls, of regular visits, of small outings that brought joy to everyone. Rachel had found a better job as an administrative assistant at a small company. The salary was still modest, but it allowed her and Zoe to move from the boarding house to a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. It was simple, with used furniture and peeling walls, but it was the first place they could call home since they lost their house. Derek had helped with the move, although Rachel didn't know that he had also discreetly paid 3 months' rent in advance to the landlord. Some things she still wouldn't accept as direct help. That Saturday afternoon, Derek arrived with Haley for their weekly visit. The girls had planned to have a camp-out in Zoe's room, with sheets hung up to create a makeshift fort. "Zoe, I brought my flashlight," Haley yelled as soon as they entered, showing off the object she considered essential for their planned adventure. "Hi, Haley." Zoe ran to hug her friend. "I already started the fort. Come see." The two ran to the room, leaving the adults behind. Derek smiled at the girls' enthusiasm. "They've been planning this all week," he commented, handing Rachel a bag with snacks and juices. Haley talked about it every day. Rachel accepted the bag with a restrained smile. Her relationship with Derek still carried a certain tension, but it had softened significantly in recent weeks. Zoe, too. She even drew a map of their campsite. From the room came laughter and the sound of furniture being dragged. Derek and Rachel exchanged worried glances. "I think we'd better check on what they're doing," Rachel suggested. In the small bedroom, they found the girls trying to push Zoe's bed against the wall to create more space for the fort. Sheets and blankets were already precariously hung from chairs and the lampshade. "Hey, adventurers," Derek called out. "How about some adult help for this campsite?" The girls readily accepted. Over the next 20 minutes, Derek helped build a surprisingly stable fort using sheets, chairs, and some clothespins Rachel found. When they finished, there was a cozy space in the middle of the room, illuminated by Haley's flashlight. "Now we need supplies for our expedition," Zoe declared seriously. "That's right," Haley agreed. "Adventurers need food and water." Rachel brought the snacks Derek had brought: sandwiches, cut fruit, cookies, and juice. The girls received everything with exclamations of joy, as if they were rare treasures. "This is the best expedition ever," Zoe declared, arranging the supplies inside the fort. "Yes, and we are the best explorers," Haley added, adjusting the flashlight to create mysterious shadows on the fort's walls. Derek and Rachel watched, both smiling at the scene. There was something magical about seeing the girls so happy with something so simple. "I think they're all set," Derek commented. "Can we leave them to their adventure while we have some coffee?" Rachel nodded, and they left the room after instructing the girls to call them if they needed anything. In the small kitchen, Rachel prepared coffee while Derek sat at the table. It was the first time they had been truly alone, without the excuse of organizing an outing or discussing schedules. "So," Rachel said, placing the cups on the table, "Haley seems excited about the new school year." "Yes," Derek replied. "She's loving her new teacher. And she won't stop talking about her science classes. They're studying plants, how they grow. Zoe is fascinated by that too. She even asked if we could plant a bean in some cotton to watch the roots grow." The conversation flowed easily for a few minutes, exchanging stories about the girls, commenting on the approaching autumn, discussing small trivialities. But there was something in the air, an underlying tension, as if they both knew they were just postponing a deeper conversation. From the room came occasional sounds of laughter and excited chatter. The girls were in their own world, inventing stories and adventures. "They've formed an incredible bond," Derek commented, looking toward the room. "I've never seen Haley connect with someone so much." "Zoe too," Rachel agreed. "She's always been a lonely child, ever since it was just the two of us." The silence returned, heavier this time. Derek took a sip of coffee, gathering his courage. "Rachel," he began cautiously, "I've never talked about Zoe's father." Rachel looked up, surprised by the direct observation. For a moment, Derek thought he had crossed a line, that she would close up again, but to his surprise, she put her cup down and took a deep breath, as if making a difficult decision. "His name was Nathan," she began, her voice low so the girls wouldn't hear from the room. "Right, we met in college. I was studying business. He was studying engineering. We got married in our senior year, too young according to our parents." A sad smile appeared on her lips. "Zoe was born a year later. We had just bought our house, a small place, but it was ours." Derek listened in silence, sensing the difficulty with which she spoke. "Nathan worked for a construction company. Ironically, he was brilliant, dedicated. He thought he had a future at the company, that he would grow there." Rachel paused, taking a sip of coffee. "When Zoe was 3, he discovered a serious structural problem in one of the projects, flaws that could put lives at risk. He reported it to his superiors, insisted that something had to be done." Derek felt a knot in his stomach, guessing where the story was headed. "They fired him," Rachel continued, her voice now distant. "They said he was exaggerating, causing trouble. Nathan couldn't get another job in the field. The industry is small, people talk. He started working as a rideshare driver, doing odd jobs to support the family. She stopped, taking a deep breath. He slept little, ate poorly. One day, he fell asleep at the wheel. "I'm so sorry," Derek said, his voice low. The silence between them was momentarily broken by a burst of laughter from the room. The contrast between the girl's joy and the sadness of the conversation was almost painful. "I was left with the debts," Rachel continued after a moment. "The mortgage, the loans we had taken out for renovations, the medical bills. I tried to keep everything in order, took on 2 jobs, sold what I could. But it wasn't enough." Derek listened to every word, feeling the weight grow in his chest. Rachel's story was not unique. How many other families had gone through similar situations because of decisions he made in comfortable boardrooms, looking only at spreadsheets and projections? The bank foreclosed on the house after a few months. "We managed to rent a small apartment for a while, but prices in the area were rising. New developments, urban revitalization, you know the speech." Rachel looked at him directly. "Suddenly, we couldn't afford the rent anymore. The landlord sold the building to a construction company that planned to demolish everything and build a commercial complex." Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that project. It was his. "They gave us 30 days notice, but we had nowhere to go. I tried to explain our situation, ask for more time. No one wanted to listen. The day after the deadline, the machines were already there. I barely had time to grab our clothes and documents." Rachel paused, looking out the window. "You know what's most ironic? The building where Nathan identified the structural problems partially collapsed 6 months later. 2 people died. If they had listened to him." Derek closed his eyes for a moment. Every word from Rachel was like a blow, every detail revealing another layer of pain his business decisions had caused. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this," Rachel said with a humorless laugh. "I guess it's because, in some strange way, you're the first person since Nathan who seems to genuinely care about Zoe. About both of us." The weight of his omissions suffocated Derek. For 2 months, he had built a relationship based on a half-truth. Rachel knew he was connected to the construction company, but she didn't know he was the owner, the president, the person who signed the eviction and demolition orders. "Rachel," he began, his voice hoarser than he intended, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked at him, intrigued by the sudden change in his tone. "The construction company that demolished your house." Derek swallowed hard, knowing there was no turning back after the next words. "It's mine." The silence that followed was absolute. Rachel stared at him, motionless, as if the words were still processing. "What?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Hayes Development. It's my company. I'm the owner, the president." The words came out with difficulty. "That day, when I found Zoe in the rubble, I was there to inspect the site." Rachel rose slowly, placing her cup on the table with excessive care, as if afraid that any sudden movement might shatter what little control she had left. "You knew," she said, her voice now trembling. "This whole time, you knew exactly who we were." "Not at first," Derek tried to explain, also standing up. "I only realized it was the same property when you mentioned the demolition. After that, yes, I knew. And you said nothing. It wasn't a question, but an accusation. You came into our lives, met my daughter, brought Haley to play with her, all while knowing that it was you. You who left us with nothing." "Rachel, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice rose now, anger finally breaking the surface. "That you felt sorry for us, that your conscience was weighing on you, and you needed to redeem yourself. That we were a convenient charity project for you to feel better about the empire you build by destroying lives like ours." Derek had no answers. Every accusation found a painful echo of truth within him. "I really care about you both," he said finally. "At first, yes, it was guilt, but then it was guilt. And then it became so much more than that." Rachel shook her head, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I trusted you," she said, her voice breaking. "We trusted you, and it was all just disguised guilt, wasn't it? Don't come back." The last words were said with a finality that hit Derek like a physical blow. "Please, think of the girls," he tried to argue. "Are Haley and Zoe? "Get out of my house," Rachel interrupted. "Now!" In the makeshift fort in the bedroom, Zoe and Haley had stopped their games. The raised voices from the kitchen had reached them, shattering the magic of their imaginary campout. "Is your mum mad at my dad?" Haley whispered, her eyes wide. Zoe nodded, hugging Buddy to her chest. "She sounds really mad." The two cautiously crept out of the fort and into the hallway. From there, they could see and hear the adults in the kitchen. "What's going on?" Zoe asked in a small voice, entering the kitchen with Haley by her side. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to control her emotions in front of her daughter. "Derek and Haley are leaving now, sweetie, but we haven't finished our expedition," Zoe protested. "Another day," Rachel replied firmly. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Zoe approached, concerned. Rachel crouched down to her daughter's level. "Sometimes adults disagree about important things, sweetie. Now say goodbye to Haley." The girls looked at each other, confused and scared by the sudden change in atmosphere. "But we were going to sleep in the fort," Haley said, looking at her father with teary eyes. "I'm sorry, Princess," Derek replied, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Don't we have to go now?" "It's not fair," Haley protested, tears starting to fall. "We didn't even do anything wrong." Zoe approached her friend and took her hand. "Don't cry, Haley. We can finish the expedition another day." But Haley could feel that something was very wrong. Even at 5 years old, she could sense the tension, the anger, the sadness that permeated the air. "Do you promise we'll play again?" she asked Zoe, her voice trembling. Before Zoe could answer, Rachel intervened. "Come on, girls. Time to say goodbye." The two hugged tightly, as if sensing it wouldn't be just a temporary farewell. Derek watched, his heart breaking to see how his omission was now hurting not just Rachel, but two innocent children. "Let's go, Haley," he called softly, holding out his hand. Reluctantly, Haley let go of Zoe and took her father's hand. Rachel remained by Zoe's side, a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Rachel," Derek tried one last time. "No," she cut him off. "It's over." As they left the apartment, Derek looked back one last time. Rachel was hugging Zoe, who was watching over her mother's shoulder, her blue eyes filled with tears and confusion. The image was seared into his mind. The girl who had changed everything in his life, now watching him leave without understanding why. In the car, Haley cried silently in the back seat. "Why did we have to leave?" she finally asked. "Zoe is my best friend." Derek looked in the rearview mirror, seeing his daughter's sad face. How do you explain to a 5-year-old the mistakes that adults make? The consequences of decisions made without thinking about the real lives affected? "Sometimes people need times, Princess," he replied, knowing the explanation was inadequate. "Rachel is upset with me right now." "But why?" Derek took a deep breath. "Because I did something that hurt her and Zoe, even though I didn't mean to. And now she's angry." "You can say you're sorry," Haley suggested with the simple logic of children. "When I do something wrong and say I'm sorry, you always forgive me." Derek felt tears well up in his own eyes. "Sometimes, Princess, an apology isn't enough. Sometimes, what we've done is too big to be fixed with words." Haley fell silent, processing the information. Then, with a wisdom that surprised Derek, she said, "Then maybe you need to fix it with actions, not with words." Derek looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, amazed by her perception. "Maybe you're right, Haley. Maybe you are." For the rest of the drive home, Derek thought about his daughter's words. Rachel had every right to be furious, to kick him out of their lives. He had hidden the most important truth, had entered their lives under false pretenses. But Haley was right. If words weren't enough, maybe actions could be. Not to earn forgiveness, he had no right to that, but to do what was right, regardless of the personal outcome. As he drove through the city streets he had helped reshape, Derek Hayes began to formulate a plan. Not to win back Rachel's trust, but to correct as much as possible the harm he had caused, not just to her and Zoe, but to all the other Rachels and Zoes his business decisions had affected over the years. It was time to face the painful past, not just theirs, but his own. 2 weeks had passed since the fight with Rachel. 2 weeks of silence, of failed attempts at contact, of unanswered messages. Derek had tried everything, calling, leaving voicemails, even sending a formal letter of apology. Nothing worked. The mansion, once just spacious, now felt immense and empty. Footsteps echoed through the marble hallways. Voices sounded hollow in the large rooms. It was as if something fundamental had been removed from the structure, leaving only a cold, hollow shell. But the worst part was seeing Haley. The once talkative and energetic girl was quiet, pensive. Her drawings, once colorful and full of sunshine, now had darker tones, lonely figures. The nanny reported that she asked about Zoe every day, wanting to know when they would see her friend again. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of day that, in recent weeks, would have been filled with a visit to Zoe and Rachel. Derek was making breakfast, something he rarely did before, but which had now become a ritual to compensate for the emptiness he felt. Animal-shaped pancakes, fresh orange juice, strawberries cut into heart shapes. Haley came down the stairs, still in her pajamas, dragging Star 2, the new stuffed horse that had replaced the original given to Zoe. She sat at the kitchen table, looking at the pancakes without her usual enthusiasm. "Good morning, Princess," Derek greeted, placing the plate in front of her. "Look, I made an elephant today. See the trunk?" Haley looked at the pancake and managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Dad." Derek sat beside her, watching as his daughter poked at the food without really eating. He waited, knowing something was coming. "Dad?" Haley finally broke the silence, her blue eyes, so much like Zoe's, fixed on him. "What did you do wrong that means we can't see Zoe anymore?" The direct, blunt question hit Derek like a punch to the gut. It was the first time Haley had framed the question so explicitly, though he knew she had been thinking about it since the day of the fight. "Why do you think I did something wrong?" he asked, buying time. Haley shrugged, a surprisingly adult gesture for a 5-year-old. "You said Rachel was mad at you, and we never visited them again. And you get sad when I ask about Zoe." Derek sighed. He had underestimated his daughter's perception. Children pick up on so much more than adults imagine, think much more deeply than we give them credit for. "You're right," he finally admitted. "I did something that hurt Rachel, and because of that, she doesn't want us to visit anymore." "What did you do?" Derek hesitated. How could he explain concepts like eminent domain, real estate development, and social consequences to a child? How could he talk about guilt, omission, and pain? "Remember how Zoe and Rachel lost their house?" he began, opting for a simplified version of the truth. "And how they had to live in different places until they found their new apartment?" Haley nodded, remembering the conversations she had overheard. "Well, the company that made them lose their house is mine. I'm the owner, and I didn't tell Rachel that for a long time." Haley frowned, processing the information. "You took their house." The innocent question carried the weight of the entire situation. Derek felt a lump in his throat. "Yes," he answered honestly. "Not directly. I didn't think about them specifically when I made the decision. But yes, at the end of the day, I am responsible." "That wasn't nice, Dad," Haley said with the brutal frankness of children. "No, it wasn't," Derek agreed. "And that's why Rachel is angry. She has every right to be." Haley pushed her plate away, the elephant-shaped pancake now cold and untouched. "But what about Zoe? Is she mad too? Does she not want to be my friend anymore?" Derek felt his heart ache. "I'm sure Zoe still wants to be your friend, Princess." "This has nothing to do with you two. It's a problem between adults." "Then why can't we see her? It's not fair." Haley's voice began to tremble, her eyes filling with tears. "She's my best friend, and I gave her Star, and we were going to make more forts and—" Derek hugged his daughter as she cried, feeling his own throat tighten with restrained emotion. The emptiness he felt was just a fraction of what Haley was experiencing, the loss of a true friendship, the first deep connection she had formed outside her family circle. "I know, Princess," he murmured into his daughter's blonde hair. "I know it hurts." When Haley's sobs subsided, she pulled away, wiping her face with the back of her hands. "Can you fix it, Dad? Can you say you're sorry?" Derek felt a tightness in his chest. "I've already tried, sweetie. Sometimes sorry isn't enough." "Then do more." Haley insisted. Do something big, like when you broke Grandma's vase and bought her a new one. Derek almost smiled at the comparison. If only it were as simple as replacing a broken vase. I'm trying, Princess, he promised. I'm thinking of ways to fix things. Haley nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer for now. She picked up her fork and began to eat the cold pancake, as if she had done her part by presenting the problem and now trusted her father to solve it. Later, after leaving Haley playing with her building blocks in her room, Derek went to his office. He sat at the mahogany desk, looking out the window at the immaculate garden below. Late autumn, the golden leaves falling slowly from the trees. The emptiness inside him wasn't just about the absence of Rachel and Zoe in their lives. He realized it was something deeper, more fundamental. It was the emptiness of who he could have been, a different man, more aware, more human, and wasn't. For years, Derek Hayes had built his life and career on numbers, not people, profits, not stories, expansion, not community. He had believed that success meant more money, more properties, more power, and in the process, he had become exactly the kind of person he would despise if he met them in another circumstance. Rachel was right to kick him out. She was right to protect Zoe from him. What kind of man entered the life of a vulnerable child, knowing he was responsible for her situation, and said nothing? What kind of man watched the suffering he caused and still remained silent? Derek opened the drawer and took out the photo they had taken at the zoo. The two girls smiling, so alike, he and Rachel at the ends, adults trying to navigate an unknown terrain. An image of what could have been but now seemed impossible. The emptiness he felt was the space between the man he was and the man he now wanted to be. Between the Derek who signed eviction orders without a thought for the consequences and the Derek who now understood the human cost of every decision. Between the distant father Haley had before and the present father he was trying to become. He placed the photo on the desk and picked up the phone. There were people he needed to contact, decisions to make, actions to initiate, not to win back Rachel, that would be too much to hope for, but to try to be the man he should have been from the beginning. To fill the emptiness not with substitutes or distractions, but with the person he finally realized he needed to become. A week after the conversation with Haley, Derek was in his office at the Hayes Development Headquarters. His desk was covered in documents, not the usual construction contracts or development projects, but something completely different. Forms for creating a foundation, donation paperwork, social housing projects. James Sullivan, his lawyer for over a decade, watched with a confused expression. Derek, I understand you want to make some kind of compensation, but this, Sullivan pointed to the papers, you're talking about millions of dollars, about completely changing the direction of the company. I'm the majority shareholder, Derek replied calmly, and I'm not asking for your opinion, James. I'm asking you to prepare the documents. The lawyer sighed, recognizing the tone that meant Derek would not change his mind. And what about this other matter? He asked, pointing to a separate folder. At the scholarship for the girl. That's personal, Derek replied. I want it to be anonymous, legally ironclad. No conditions, no possibility of revocation. She deserves this, regardless of what happens between me and her mother. Sullivan nodded, gathering the papers. I'll prepare everything. But I think you should consider... I've considered enough, Derek interrupted. In fact, the problem was precisely not having considered it before. When the lawyer left, Derek looked out the panoramic window of the 30th floor. The city stretched out below, a mosaic of buildings, streets, and parks. How many lives had been affected by his decisions over the years? How many families like Rachel's and Zoe's? He couldn't change the past, but the future was still in his hands. 3 days later, Derek parked his car, not the luxury Audi, but a more discreet model, in front of the building where Rachel worked. He had discovered she'd gotten a job as an administrative assistant at an accounting firm. The pay was better than at the restaurant, but still insufficient to provide Zoe with the kind of education and opportunities Derek knew she deserved. He waited on the sidewalk without entering the building. He didn't want to put her in an awkward situation in front of her colleagues. When the workday ended, he saw Rachel leaving among a group of employees. She froze when she saw him. For a moment, Derek thought she would simply ignore his presence and walk on. He wouldn't blame her if she did. But after saying goodbye to her colleagues, Rachel walked toward him. Her face showed no anger, only weariness and a cautious curiosity. "What do you want, Derek?" she asked directly, without hostility, but also without any hint of forgiveness. "5 minutes," he replied. "That's all. After that, if you want me to never show up in your life again, I'll respect that." Rachel looked at her watch. 5 minutes. "I have to pick up Zoe from the neighbor who watches her after school." They walked side by side to a small nearby park. Rachel kept her distance, her arms crossed defensively. "How is she?" Derek asked. "Zoe, she misses Haley," Rachel answered honestly. "She asks about her almost every day." Derek nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "Haley too. She's quieter, draws less." They sat on a bench with enough space between them to make it clear they were not friends, just two people having a necessary conversation. "Rachel, I didn't come to ask for forgiveness," Derek began, choosing his words carefully. "I don't have that right. I came because there's something I need to say, and a few things I want to offer, with no strings attached." She studied him with cautious eyes, but didn't interrupt. "I can't change what I did," he continued. "I can't undo the demolition of your house. I can't bring Nathan back. I can't erase the months of hardship you and Zoe went through." Derek paused, gathering his courage. "But I can change what I do from now on. I want to ensure Zoe has everything that was taken from her. Education, security, a future." He took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket and offered it to Rachel. "What's this?" she asked, making no move to take it. "Documents for a scholarship for Zoe at Westwood Academy." Rachel raised her eyebrows, surprised. "The private school where Haley studies. The one that costs more per year than I make in 3. Derek nodded. "It's a full scholarship, guaranteed until the end of high school. It includes uniforms, school supplies, extracurricular activities, everything. My name isn't on it. It officially comes from an educational foundation. No one but the two of us will know the source." Rachel stared at the envelope, still not touching it. "Why would you do this?" she asked, her voice softer. "Because Zoe deserves every possible opportunity," Derek replied simply. "Because she is brilliant, curious, and brave. And because, yes, I feel responsible for what happened to you." He took a deep breath before continuing. "But I want to make something absolutely clear. There are no conditions. I am not buying access to you or Zoe. I am not asking you to forgive me or to allow me back into your lives. If you accept this, it will be on your terms, not mine." Rachel finally took the envelope, opening it to briefly examine the documents. "And if I say no, then I will respect your decision," Derek replied. "The scholarship will remain available in case you change your mind. And I will find other ways to help families like yours, so that what happened to you doesn't happen again." Rachel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm restructuring Hayes Development," he explained, "creating an affordable housing division, establishing a fund to support families displaced by our past projects. It's not charity, it's responsibility." Rachel studied his face, as if searching for signs of falsehood or manipulation. What she saw, however, was different from the Derek she had met months ago. This man seemed more human, less the embodiment of corporate power, and more someone genuinely trying to fix his mistakes. "And what about Haley?" she asked after a moment. "Does she know about all this?" "She knows I made mistakes and that I'm trying to fix them," Derek replied. "And yes, she would be immensely happy if Zoe went to the same school, but I've made it clear that might not happen, that it depends entirely on you." Rachel looked at the documents again, thoughtful. Her fingers brushed across the pages that detailed opportunities she could never provide for her daughter on her own. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Why not before? Why wait until I found out everything in the worst possible way?" It was a fair question, one Derek had been asking himself since the day of the fight. "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "Because I was afraid of losing what we had built, the girls, friendship, the moments we spent together. I feared exactly what ended up happening." Rachel nodded slowly. At least you're being honest now. I'm trying, Derek agreed. It's the least I can do. A silence settled between them. In the park, people hurried by, oblivious to the crucial moment unfolding on that bench. I need to think, Rachel said finally, putting the envelope in her purse. This isn't a decision I can make on my own. I have to consider what's best for Zoe. Of course, Derek agreed. Take all the time you need. He stood up, respecting the 5 minutes he had promised. Rachel remained seated, looking at the purse where she had stored the documents. Derek, she called as he began to walk away. I don't forgive you, not yet, maybe never. He nodded, accepting. I understand. But, she continued, choosing her words, if I accept this, it will be for Zoe, not for you. That's all I ask, he replied with sincerity. 3 weeks later, Derek received a short message from Rachel. Zoe starts at Westwood next Monday. Thank you. There was nothing more, no invitation to return to their lives, no suggestion of reconciliation, just the acceptance of the help offered, on her terms. It was enough. On the first day of school, Derek took Hayley to school as he always did. His heart beat faster with the possibility of seeing Zoe again, but he was determined to keep his distance, not to force anything. Dad, look! Hayley exclaimed suddenly, pointing to the school entrance. It's Zoe! It's Zoe! And there she was, wearing the Westwood navy blue uniform, her blonde hair in a braid. Beside her, Rachel, holding her backpack and looking slightly out of place among the other well-dressed parents. Hayley let go of Derek's hand and ran toward her friend. The two girls hugged as if the months of separation had never existed, talking at the same time, laughing, jumping with joy. Derek remained where he was, watching from a distance. He didn't want to invade the moment, didn't want to pressure Rachel. When his eyes met hers across the schoolyard, he simply nodded in acknowledgement. She returned the gesture, without a smile, but also without the anger he had seen last time. Weeks turned into months. Derek kept his promise of distance, letting Rachel set the boundaries of contact. Sometimes, he would receive a brief message about a school activity the girls were doing together. Occasionally, she would allow Zoe to visit Hayley to play, always with the nanny present, never with Derek. He accepted everything without question, without pressure, without expectations. This new arrangement wasn't about him. It was about the girls, about giving Zoe the opportunities she deserved, about allowing their friendship to flourish again. On a spring afternoon, almost 6 months after Zoe's return to Hayley's life, Derek received an unexpected call from Rachel. The girls have a school project to do together, she explained. Try it about different families. I thought maybe they could do it at your house this weekend, if you're available to supervise them. Derek felt a wave of emotion that he tried to control. Of course, that would be great. Do you want me to pick Zoe up, or would you prefer to bring her? I'll bring her, Rachel replied. And Derek, thank you. Not just for the school, but for everything else you've been doing. What do you mean? There was a pause. The new housing project in my old neighborhood, the foundation for displaced families. I know you're behind it all. Derek didn't respond immediately. He hadn't done it for her to know, to gain credit or gratitude. It was the right thing to do, he said simply. Yes, Rachel agreed. It was. A year after the day of the scholarship, everyone's life had changed significantly. Rachel had been promoted to administrative manager at her company. Her salary now allowed her to live with comfort and dignity, without depending on anyone's financial help. There was something in her posture that wasn't there before, a confidence, a certainty of her own worth. Zoe excelled in school, not only academically, but also in arts and sports. She had adapted quickly to the new environment, winning over friends and teachers with her intelligence and kindness. But no one held the special place in her life that Hayley did. The two were inseparable. They shared schoolwork, secrets, dreams for the future. Hayes' development had also transformed. The new affordable housing division had already built its first condominium, offering decent housing at fair prices, with priority given to families displaced by the company's previous projects. The support fund had helped dozens of families find stability again. Derek watched it all with a mixture of joy and humility. He had learned to be a more present father to Haley, inspired by Rachel's devotion to Zoe. He had transformed his company, prioritizing human impact alongside profit, and he had accepted that some things couldn't be completely fixed, only acknowledged, respected, and used as lessons for the future. When he saw Rachel at school meetings or during the girls' occasional visits, there was a cautious cordiality. They weren't close friends, they weren't family, but they had found a balance. He remained present as support, but not as an intimate part of their lives. He played his part with dignity, from a distance, with respect. It was enough. It had to be. Deep down, Derek knew that true redemption wasn't in Rachel's forgiveness, but in the real changes he had made. In the way he now looked into the eyes of the people affected by his projects, how he listened to their stories, how he considered their needs, in the way he was raising Haley to see beyond privilege, to understand responsibility and empathy.